Okay, this lesson for the KOINE Project Class, we've mentioned collaborative reasoning often and like to do a demonstration of that. And then look at collaboration concerning creation in light of the unification theory, which says that you can come to an outcome, a product that is, a theory, we'll say, that's greater than the sum of its parts, including, let's say, competing theories, as we've noticed in the either this or that, the young or old earth. And then in light of the law of non-contradiction, where it's asserted you couldn't have a married bachelor, so it would contradict. So there would be no such thing as that. However, we remember the Trinity, where you have on one hand people saying one God, and you have on the other hand people saying many gods. And when we have the Bible telling us very simply stated that we have this one eternal, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient being in three persons. The three persons are called the Trinity and described that way. Well, you just notice that the antecedent to the pronouns, speaking of attributes that belong only to God Himself, that you'll find Father, Son, and Holy Spirit to be the antecedents to pronouns throughout the Bible. And those are personal pronouns, and the antecedents are persons. So we notice that the law of non-contradiction holds no relation to the reality of the Trinity that is far surpassing. So the God of the Bible is uniquely set apart, holy, holy, holy. Even that is expressed, holy, 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 three expressions in the Bible. So let's look at what it looks like according to collaborative reasoning and collaboration concerning creation, and why we can enjoy that. And I wouldn't want anything less than collaboration. Of course, here's a Bible I've had for years now. I've had it for so long I can't read it anymore. The print, it shrank, I guess. I left it out in the rain or something. But, in the middle column, it'll tell you that the earth was created in 4004. So we're finished studying. We don't have to worry about it. Usher has taken care of that, we might say. Certainly that would not be the case, but let's just start there and I'll go as quickly as possible. So let's just say Usher, and he said, actually he said October 23rd, 4004. Now you notice if we collaborate, it would beg the question, well, when did he say it would end? Because he believed to the very day. Notice that date. Well, he believed October 23rd, 1996. And you remember we collaborating, we noticed that Newton had said the world would end in 2060. And then it was brought to my attention there are those who calculated 80 years from 1948, which would be 2028. And then, of course, while we were collaborating, colleagues and co-laborers with Christ that I know who are also pastor Lord's churches, like Dr. Johnson, Dr. Kelly, and always Dr. Penn there anytime we need to speak with him. Well, we noticed that Usher was minus 32 years from 2028, 1996, and Newton was plus 32 years. And that's a year that refers to Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. So then number two, while we're collaborating, Genesis 1:1 has a numeric value of pi, and then John 1:1 has the numeric value of e. And of course, that's something that if you're engaging with an atheist and out there on the global platform now, some of you are finding out that you're quite formidable when you approach anyone, whether the person is a physicist or a historian or whatever field of science they have as their accomplished field of study, for example. And of course, an atheist, whether he's a scientist or a historian, he won't notice. He might be mocking that the Bible, quote, got the age of the earth wrong, and he won't be prepared. And so gracious and deliberate and very methodical and systemically you can present now, and you're noticing, hey, I can tell them that I've noticed things myself, and there's links. I'll provide the link where it's already been calculated out. You can notice all that, and then introduce that to the conversation. And you'll notice, like in most cases where, let's say, there's competing theories, which someone says, well, I'm competing and I'm advocating young, and another one says, I'm competing, I'm advocating old. But now you notice competing and advocating aren't collaborating, because it's not often believed that something greater could come than the parts that are involved in the banter or the conversation. But the Trinity, don't forget the Trinity. Always remind let's say it's a religious friend or colleague, and they're, well, not a colleague, but a friend, and they're more or less an acquaintance, or you're witnessing, and they might become adversarial, and that's a competitive spirit. Well, they don't realize that there's more to learn than perhaps that which they themselves have assumed. So then, of course, we have in Genesis 1:1, we have a correlation with Jeremiah 4:23 through 28. You can notice that. I'll have links to the books that we have. Speaking of that, Dr. Penn, if you want to know how substantial you can study creation and enjoy it through collaboration. He had this book, Jesus Christ, the Planet Earth. That's a PDF, no charge to have that. This massive book, Theocentric Physicalism. It's a very fascinating study. Some of these incorporate parts from others. Here's one, Theocentricity, a theory of every created thing, and it shows how all these things, rather than a partitive perspective, it's holistic, showing how all this comes together for a much greater outcome than the sum of its parts. First Adam and the planet Earth. There's one. This is also PDF. And then this one, 4 Earths, 2 atoms. Again, most people you run across, again, they aren't prepared to be involved in this has been over a period of over 7 years of intense collaboration. First Adam, planet Earth, Jesus Christ, planet Earth, which is what I just showed you. Here's one that's really gained a lot of attention. It's not that big, but it's the Bible Doctrine of Time, Difficult Problems in Creation Solved. And then this one is really fascinating. It's a compilation of facts and figures of both science and the Bible concerning the inhabitants of the earth. So these are all PDF, and you can go to imkoine.org or baptistlamp.org or the book tab and see all that. So again, collaboration produces that, and I really wouldn't know why. Well, for example, you'll find people, scholars, who have been, let's say, young earth advocates who now have trended toward old earth, but there's no reason to abandon young, speaking chronologically, that is, for the other. And then some have been old earth, or let's say gap theorists, who may have, like one of our professors, unsurpassed scholar, once said gap fact, and now he's saying gap fiction, which really, if you think about it, it was very encouraging to see someone untethered and then evaluating something. And you can do the same thing with both, however. That's what ultimately leads to the unification theory. So you can go here to these texts, Genesis 1:1. Also in Genesis 1:1, we have instantaneity. Instantaneity based on Isaiah 48:3. God said he created instantly, and we know the event creation, that one event divided by infinity. Remember, God's infinite in his power. So that equals 0. No time expired. So there was no time in the creation of Genesis 1:1, no time involved, no chronos, that is. It did not exist, and it did not come to exist in that moment. And there was no energy, I'll just say loss, that would be better. No loss of energy. God's immutable. So without loss of energy and without the expenditure of time, God created Genesis 1:1 instantaneity. Now we have, in collaboration, we don't have a problem where we have to say, well, I have to push instantaneity out, or I have to ignore the numeric values of the letters. Well, the letters are numbers in the Hebrew Bible, so that's quite an advantage. If you notice, there's numbers, it's pictographic, and it's phonetic. So you have all three. Again, like the unification theory, it produces a theory that can make the competing theories obsolete, or as what we learned through collaboration, we can incorporate these things for an outcome greater than the sum of its parts. And this is why it becomes so fascinating, because especially if you are out there witnessing to people who are seriously calling into question creation or God's existence or whatever, they're not prepared. They're using the part as a partitive perspective. They're using that part as one man. He's once a theologian, once a pastor, now he's an atheist, and he's a historian, whatever. So another one was once a pastor, now he's an atheist, and he just talks about goofy things the Bible teaches, and it was wrong about the age of the earth. And so he's not prepared either. He's taking what part he has been by it disabled, and now he's going out to enable himself to function. So here we had Genesis 1:1 compared to that. Then also we had in Genesis 1:1, we have bara. Bara. That's the word create. And then we noticed as collaborators in beginning, remember you included all, that's why you'll go from Jeremiah, Isaiah, Genesis, you'll take the whole Bible, and we went from to Genesis to John 1:1, both creation text. And then we will notice there was in beginning creation, Genesis, I think 2:1, we had Asa, there we go. That was make, and that was also done in time. So let me put my punctuation here. This was done in time, big yom. Oh, wait a minute, sorry, big yom. Now, yom, it's interesting, this word yom, it includes like heat, like hot or heat of the day, so to speak. So that's interesting that God worked in the day. And that's really interesting, because Jesus said in John 11:9, that 12 hours in the day. And so day and time come from the same word yom, and we now can notice what took place. So we can see here there was an in time work, which that is not the same as in beginning, because this is in time, and time did not exist. We also noticed Bullinger, he's a famous language scholar, but he had made a blunder. That's just to use the word to help me remember Bullinger. His blunder was, he said, between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, you can place all the time. You can place time, speaking of it, a time in his life. Geologists were working on evaluating the earth and studying it and trying to calculate ages. So he just said, well, whenever they figure that out to their satisfaction, you can just place it between Genesis 1 and Genesis 1:2. However, that wasn't the case, because we know that chronos, referential time, where we get chronological, referential time, chronological did not exist. That happened later in the creation account, where God gave us what we call our solar system, and it's used for measurement of seasons and to know and be able to distinguish those. So it did not exist. So that error there, so there's no such thing as having to place 1 year or millions or even billions of years. There is a measure of the destruction, that when we took 1,000 years today, we have a number that's even more times than the speed of light. It refers to a catapulsion in the original judgment of Satan, which now I'm understanding that people who identify as young earthers are now reversed their position. At one time, I think they were bantering, or whoever they are. It must be they're believers, so I don't disassociate with them. It's just that they were arguing that Adam must have sinned first and not the devil, but now they've reversed that. I think even Answers in Genesis now is trying to find a place for the devil to sin first. So that's really trying to incorporate, or if you will, you may be forcing something into something, but it's more self-evident in the Bible and certainly on a larger scale in its significance. So we don't really have that problem there. So we had this blunder. There is no time between here. This is, like I said before, there are those who've gone from gap. Now, there's more than one gap theory. So they went from gap fact to gap fiction. But now, as biblicists, and then, for example, if you believe in the ecclesia, as the Bible teaches, you're called a Baptist, a baptizer, and that's because you preach the gospel and baptize those who believe it, and they come out and covenant together and serve as a body of Christ under Christ's direct and immediate headship. So we're not Catholic and not Protestant. So to go from one to the other, but staying in the either or really it doesn't correspond to the higher order of Baptist. And what we do is we use the Bible as our rule of faith and practice. We acknowledge Jesus between the ecclesia and God, no one between us, no hierarchy. As the Bible said, it will not be so among you where they lord over one another. And, even some sensationalized movie is about to be released called Conclave, and all this bizarre and political and evil and good and maneuvering in this global conglomerate that even those who identify as Catholic don't agree with each other and couldn't even begin to fathom the scope and realm of a global theistic order in which you won't find any two say the same thing once or one say the same thing twice. So this would be uncharacteristic of collaboration. So we incorporate all the data, and we don't have to then go back and forth. Of course, I'll just go here. Psalm 90 told us about remember the number 90, 90% of lifespan is was reduced from 100% of humanity, or mankind, I'll say. So Adam was cursed. He lived after he fell. He had then 1,000-year day, but it's actually time period. He died at 930 years. Methuselah, 969. No one lived outside that 1,000-year period of time period, I should say. So now we were reduced to 100 years, let's say approximately. So we are now dying. Our decay rate is 10 times faster. We have a decay rate 10 times faster. So Psalm 90 says we should count our days, count those days. Time's over if you're still squandering it and not being an investor in it and not being a steward of it. Your time will be over. That's why collaboration will have an outcome that's even better for the world we're reaching, the testimony we're communicating, the veracity of Scripture and its unsurpassed excellency, the fact that the Bible is over 1,500-year period of time to compile it, multiple authors over 40 or around 40, approximately 3 languages, maybe as many as 7 different genres, and yet it comes together with a precision that is beyond mathematical certainty and beyond the ridicule of those who would say of it what they didn't bother to even evaluate. So those of you that have bothered to take the time, you take these resources, you collaborate, you can stand here like I'm doing, just freehanding this, and then you can show those who mock the earth and the Bible's understanding of time and age and decay. And you can point out that young, as people use that word, we define it as chronos, that is chronological. And we only do that because we can. We're collaborating. Chronological. There we go. And then we notice old is a measure of decay. For example, I found out recently that my heart's younger than my age, and others are quite concerned when their doctor says your heart is so many years older than you because your resting heart rate's so high, and those number of beats are finite. So we certainly don't want our number of beats to keep accelerating. We don't want our blood pressure up. And yes, people can be a lot older than their chronological age. So at 62, I have a heart that's a lot younger, and that's considered better fitness, metabolic age, biological age. So that's all known by all rational beings, especially coming from science and medicine, which all came from calculus and chemistry and physics, which all came from theology, which all came from the Bible. So it's a measure of decay. So that will help you when you're witnessing or discussing or can get in some conversation with an atheist. If you can find one, they will be averse, or some religionist who says, no, I'm either for this or against that, or, that type of abridged thinking that has no, it's limited. It's now unable. It doesn't invite all the scriptures to be incorporated. So when we notice this, Psalm 90, and then we have this, number 8, I should have said. Number 8, we define our terms. Let's go ahead and go to number 9, where we notice there's a 6,000. We use 6,250 years per 12-hour night. And we use 6,250 years per 12-hour day. And notice this multiplicative inverse that we have, and I'll just put a note here, the 1 day to 1,000 years. That is a multiplicative inverse because you have 1,000 years are like 1 day. And you notice that's what that is. That's third grade arithmetic, the relationship between multiplication and division. So we just noticed that because we were collaborating. So now we have 12,500 years per, or at 24 hours total. So moving on, we then come across into this, which what we're doing is this is our conversion factor. And now here we are. So now we'll take this 12,500, 500, using this as our operator, if you will, years times 360 days, because we want to go convert this to days. That equals 4.5 million days. And there we go. And then we want to go ahead and complete this by then multiply it by 1,000 years. And we notice that equals for us 4.5 billion years. And that's of decay, accrued decay. And we'll notice the rate of that compounding decay, if you will, like compound interest. The number E is found in that, and it's beyond mathematical certainty. It's been demonstrated in math. So now we'll go ahead and go this direction, take our 4.5 billion amount of decay and go this way. And so we'll multiply it by 1,000 days, because we're going to go back now to take years to days. So we're going to go by 1,000 days, which is approximately 2.78 360-day years. And we learned that equals 12.5 billion. Now, at this time, you probably will look up, and the atheists have left, the one who wanted to debate, you probably left the room. The people in the audience have filed out, and the few left are like, why didn't anyone tell me this? Well, collaboration is not a form of engaging. Like, for example, Deborah Tannen wrote a book about the argumentative culture we're in, where we win by arguing. There's even an expression about a technique where someone just pelts someone with verses, explaining nothing, positing nothing, using etymology, no, lexicography, no, word meanings, no, doing any grammar. No, they just overwhelm a person. So again, you might find someone that'd be interested in having this conversation, and then you can show them, well, here, and I'll block this off just for, but you can notice them. You can tell them the value of E is 2.7182818284090. Oh, it's 45. Sorry. 459045 ... And then you can show them how this is approximately E, because we were just using whole numbers, integers. We weren't going into some type of precision with decimals or repeating decimals or otherwise. So now you can show that people in the Bible not only had knowledge of the chronology, but of the rate of decay and how it accrued. You have examples where water was turned to wine instantly. You have example where a fig tree was cursed and the students marveled the next day when they pointed out to Jesus it had already decayed. God can decay something as fast as he wants to. Individuals have different decay rates. What we try to do is mediate our decay rate by hydration, minerals, let's say, and some type of exercise, walking, things like that. And then some, like me, I have to do physical therapy from serious injuries over the years. But long story short is this is what happens. This is what collaboration looks like. This is why the law of non-contradiction wouldn't apply any more than it would to the Trinity. This is why competing theories, really the competing is actually sustaining the opposition and preventing the collaboration. As long as there's a barrier of collaboration, it's not really something brethren should be known for. That is, building barriers to collaboration. Again, though, sometimes people don't want to participate if their toolkit is wanting or lacking, and they would rather talk than listen, or they'd rather win than want knowledge and desire knowledge. So this is a lot up here. This is a lot. We've covered much, but in a short time. But remember, there's an end time description in the Bible. There's a in beginning work. There's day. There's the word yom, time. There's instantaneity. There's pi and e in the creation passages. There's pattern even in theologians like an Ussher and a Newton who lived years apart, and yet their calculations have a centricity on an event that others are researching in relationship to 1948, which is something I don't know how they came to those conclusions, except the Psalm says with strength you could live beyond 70, so that's where the 80 came from. And of course 1948 being a historical event of that country over in the Middle East. Now, it's not to say those people are of Christ, because we know no one is, all Israel's not Israel. Those who reject Jesus are certainly not Israel. So we're speaking of a geopolitical event and a location that's under dispute even to this day. So that was to qualify that. So that was it. This is enough to really start the conversation. And like I said, you can go to the links and see all these papers and all these amazing things that are in the Bible, and ask yourself, how could anyone call it into question? Well, as long as it remains unknown and buried beneath the camouflage and the chaos of banter and competition and whatever that nonsense is, then there are people out there being disserved. God's not receiving the glory. His son's interests are not being served, and the good of others is not being assured. And so if you want the best for another, collaborate with a brother. We'll call it that. So you have a blessed day. Enjoy this lesson.